the yard.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
A good-sized man, or something. It looks like a man.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was.
Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses.
If I was going to take it, or whatever it was. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Tia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
Son of a bitch is about 6'9".
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
And the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big, real big person.
But it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person or somebody really big.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses. I've had some emails asking from people asking when I'm going to do my episodes and that kind of thing. And let me explain what's going on. Where I work in a plastic recycling plant during, you would say your day job, but I got switched to nights. So I actually work the midnight shift, which is from 8 at night until 8:30 in the morning. So I've been trying to figure out, the best time would actually where I would have a regular set time every week to do the show would be more, like 5 in the afternoon, that kind of thing. But I really don't think I'm going to get many people wanting to listen at 5 or able to listen at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I've been trying to figure out when can I have the show. And really, I guess what it's come down to is that I've decided to do the show at 10 o'clock on Saturday nights, but it'll be every other Saturday because the shift work I do, because it's 12 hours, the way it works is I have 2 on and 2 off, which means every other weekend I work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in order to make that schedule work correctly for 4 shifts, because we have 1 day and 1 night. And then, when we're off, there's 2 more, another day and another night. So in order for that schedule to work, every other weekend we work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then every other weekend, obviously, we're off Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I'm going to have to do the shows on Saturday nights at 10 o'clock at night, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time. And that's the best I've come up with so far, which is right now. All right. So if y'all want to make sure that you're notified of when I'm going to have, because some people have a hard time keeping track, the people I work with, they have a hard time keeping track of which weekend they're working, which one they're not. And we kind of just know if we worked on, Thursday, we don't work that weekend. That's kind of where a lot of them end up at. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss a show, click the little bell, subscribe if you're not subscribed, click that little bell symbol. And that means that you'll get an email saying that, I've got a show coming up, because I'm going to start putting there's a scheduling function, and I'm going to actually schedule them so that the notification will go out ahead of time instead of just going live like I did tonight. And I did that because I haven't officially started my live program yet, my regular live program yet. So if you do that, you'll get an email notification from me. So for tonight, and just so you know, upcoming live shows I have, I'm trying to get Brenda Harris. I was actually contacted by somebody who knows her, and I guess he's going to arrange for her to be on the show. I'm hoping that will be the first real regular live show, which would be not next Saturday, but the one after that. And it would be kind of fitting Brenda Harris, because I think Brenda Harris is great. I listen to her on every podcast I can catch her on, and I like her mentality, her demeanor, her knowledge. I just think she's great. I think it would be fantastic for her to be my very first regular interview. But I've got two other people I'm trying to get to come on who have Bigfoot encounters to talk about. Um, there was something else. Oh, I'm going to do another. I'm going to do another episode where I discuss the government conspiracies again, because I can't, there's been a podcast discussing a certain situation or incident or whatever where a whole lot of talk is about the government cover up has been mixed in there. And it's not so much the beating up of the whoever it is. I have no doubt that they feel the way that they do, that's correct. But I think it's a perfect example of how it gets out of hand, out of proportion. People jump to conclusions and that kind of thing. And then when you go through the grapevine, like I was talking about in the one episode, the game of the telephone game, by the time it starts out and it ends, you go from, one, let's say one FBI guy had questioned me about this to the men in black were threatening them. By the time it goes through the grapevine, that's the way it can mutate. So I wanted to kind of take this and show the perfect example of how things are misunderstood or how they might be misunderstood. I'm also going to talk about how it could be true, if where things could be true like that. Anyhow, that's an upcoming show too. If I can't get Brenda Harris on the Saturday after next, then I'll probably do that one first. So anyway, let's get on with the show. Tonight I'm going to be just going over the Albert Ostman kidnapping story. And then I've made some notes on what at least I glean from the things that he talks about, the behavior and what happened, and the things that the conclusions I come to about the behavior of Sasquatch based on his story. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to put it up here for you so that y'all, if you can read it along with me. I think the last time I did this, it wasn't too bad. Like if you have a good size monitor and you can put it in full screen, you can pretty much read it along with me. So let me get that queued up for you, and we'll get going. Okay. This is from Bigfoot Classics again. It's Albert Ostman's story, and it starts like this. I have always followed logging and construction work. This time I had worked for over 1 year on a construction job and thought a good vacation was in order. BC is famous for lost gold mines. One is supposed to be at the head of Toba Inlet. Why not look for this mine and have a vacation at the same time? I took the Union steamship boat to Lund, BC. From there, I hired an old Indian to take me to the head of Toba Inlet. This old Indian was a very, very talkative gentleman. He told me stories about gold brought out by a white man from this lost mine. I'm going to make this bigger because I'm actually having trouble reading it, so you probably are too. My encoder's trying to capture my screen, my keyboard, so let me blow this up myself. There we go. I think I need to change my contacts is what I need to do. It got a little fuzzy on me. Okay. He told me stories about gold brought out by a white man from this lost mine. This white man was a very heavy drinker, spent his money freely in saloons, but he had no trouble in getting more money. He would be away a few days and come back with a bag of gold, but one time he went to his mine and never came back. Some people said a Sasquatch had killed him. At that time, I had never heard of a Sasquatch, so I asked what kind of an animal he called a Sasquatch. The Indian said, they have hair all over their bodies, but they're not animals. They're people, big people living in the mountains. My uncle saw the tracks of one that were 2 feet long. One old Indian saw one over 8 feet tall. I told the Indian I didn't believe in their old fables about mountain giants. I might have been some thousands of years ago, but not nowadays. The Indian said, there may not be many, but they still exist. We arrived at the head of the inlet about 4 p.m. I made camp at the mouth of the creek. The Indian had supper with me, and I told him to look out for me in about 3 weeks. I would be camping at the same spot when I came back. Next morning, I took my rifle with me, but left my equipment at the camp. I decided to look around for some deer trail to lead me up into the mountains. On the way up the inlet, I had seen a pass in the mountain that I had wanted to go through to see what was on the other side. I spent most of the forenoon looking for a trail, but found none, except for a hogback running down to the beach. So I swamped out a trail from there, got back to my camp about 3 p.m. that afternoon, and made up my pack to be ready in the morning. My equipment consisted of one 30-30 Winchester rifle. I had a special homemade prospecting pick, axe on one end, pick on the other. I had a leather case for this pick, which fastened to my belt, also my sheath knife. The storekeeper at Lund was cooperative. He gave me some cans for my sugar, salt, and matches to keep them dry. My grub consisted mostly of canned stuff, except for a side of bacon, a bag of beans, 4 pounds of prunes, and 6 packets of macaroni, cheese, 3 pounds of pancake flour, and 6 packets of Rye King hardtack, 3 rolls of snuff, 1 quart sealer of butter, and 2 1-pound cans of milk. I had 2 boxes of shells for my rifle. The storekeeper gave me a biscuit tin. I put a few things in that and cached it under a windfall, so I'd have it when I came back here waiting for a boat to bring me out. My sleeping bag I rolled up and tied on top of my pack sack. Together my ground sheet, small frying pan, and 1 aluminum pot that held about a gallon. As my canned food was used, I would get plenty of empty cans to cook with. The following morning, I had an early breakfast, made up my pack, and started out up this hogback. My pack must have been at least 80 pounds, besides my rifle. After 1 hour, I had to rest. I kept resting and climbing all that morning. About 2 p.m., I came to a flat place below a rock bluff. There was a bunch of willow in one place. I made a wooden spade and started digging for water. About a foot down, I got a seeping of water, so I decided to camp here for the night and scout around for the best way to get on from here. I must have been up to near 1,000 feet. There was a most beautiful view over the islands in the strait, tugboats with log booms and fishing boats going in all directions. A lovely spot. I spent the following day prospecting round, but no sign of minerals. I found a deer trail leading toward this pass that I had seen on my way up the inlet. The following morning I started out early while it was cool. It was steep climbing with my heavy pack. After a 3 hours climb, I was tired and stopped to rest. On the other side of a ravine from where I was resting was a yellow spot below some small trees. I moved over there and started digging for water. I found a small spring and made a small trough from cedar bark and got a small amount of water. I had my lunch and rested here till evening. I made it over the pass late that night. Now I had downhill and a good going, but I was hungry and tired, so I camped at the first bunch of trees I came to. I was trying to size up the terrain, what direction I would take from here. Towards west would lead to lowland and some other inlet, so I decided to go in a northeastern direction, had good going and slight downhill all day. I must have made 10 miles when I came to a small spring and a big black hemlock tree. This was a lovely campsite. I spent 2 days here just resting and prospecting. The first night here, I shot a small deer. 2 days later, I found an exceptionally good campsite. It was 2 good-sized cypress trees growing close together and near a rock wall with a nice spring just below these trees. I intended to make this my permanent camp. I cut lots of brush for my bed between these trees. I rigged up a pole from this rock wall to hang my pack sack on, and I arranged some flat rocks for my fireplace for cooking. I had a really classy setup, and that is when things began to happen. I'm a heavy sleeper. Not much disturbs me after I go to sleep, especially on a good bed like I had now. Next morning, I noticed things had been disturbed during the night, but nothing missing I could see. I roasted my grouse on a stick for breakfast. That night, I filled up the magazine of my rifle. I still had 1 box of 20 shells and 6 shells in my coat pocket. That night, I laid my rifle under the edge of my sleeping bag. I thought a porcupine had visited me the night before, and porkies like leather. So I put my shoes in the bottom of my sleeping bag. Next morning, my pack sack had been emptied out. Someone had turned the sack upside down. It was still hanging on the pole from the shoulder straps as I had hung it up. Then I noticed 1 half-pound package of prunes was missing. Also, my pancake flour was missing, but my salt bag was not touched. Porkies always look for salt, so I decided it must be something else other than porkies. I looked for tracks, but found none. I did not think it was a bear. They always tear up and make a mess of things. I kept close to camp these days in case this visitor would come back. I climbed up on a big rock where I had a good view of the camp, but nothing showed up. I was hoping it would be a porky, so I would get a good porky stew. These visits had now been going on for 3 nights. This night it was cloudy and looked like it might rain. I took special notice of how everything was arranged. I closed my pack sack. I did not undress. I only took off my shoes, put them in the bottom of my sleeping bag. I drove my prospecting pick into one of the cypress trees so I could reach it from my bed. I also put the rifle alongside me inside the sleeping bag. I fully intended to stay awake all night to find out who my visitor was, but I must have fallen asleep. I was awakened by something picking me up. I was half asleep, and at first I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. My first thought was it must be a snowslide, but there was no snow around my camp. Then it felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. I tried to reason out what kind of animal this could be. I tried to get at my sheath knife and cut my way out, but I was in an almost sitting position, and the knife was under me. I could not get hold of it, but the rifle was in front of me. I had a good hold of that, and had no intention of letting it go. At times I could feel my pack sack touching me, and could feel the cans in the sack touching my back. After what seemed like an hour, I could feel we were going up a steep hill. I could feel myself rise for every step. What was carrying me was breathing hard and sometimes gave a slight cough. Now I knew this must be one of the mountain Sasquatch giants the Indian told me about. I was in a very uncomfortable position, unable to move. I was sitting on my feet, and one of the boots in the bottom of the bag was crossways with the hobnail sole up across my foot. It hurt me terribly, but I could not move. It was very hot inside. It was lucky for me that this fellow's hand was not big enough to close up the whole bag when he picked me up. There was a small opening at the top, otherwise I would have choked to death. Now he was going downhill. I could feel myself touching the ground at times, and at one time he dragged me behind him, and I could feel he was below me. Then he seemed to get on level ground and was going at a trot for a long time. By this time I had cramps in my legs. The pain was terrible. I was wishing he would get to his destination soon. I could not stand this type of transportation much longer. Now he was going uphill again. It did not hurt me so bad. I tried to estimate distance and directions. As near as I could guess, we were about 3 hours traveling. I had no idea when he started, as I was asleep when he picked me up. Finally, he stopped and let me down. Then he dropped my pack sack. I could hear the cans rattle. Then I heard chatter, some kind of talk I did not understand. The ground was sloping, so when he let go of my sleeping bag, I rolled downhill. I got my head out and got some air. I tried to straighten my legs and crawl out, but my legs were numb. It was still dark. I could not see what my captors looked like. I tried to massage my legs to get some life in them and get my shoes on. I could hear now it was at least 4 of them. They were standing around me and continuously chattering. I had never heard of Sasquatch before, and the Indian told me about them, but I knew I was right among them. But how to get away from them, that was another question. I got to see the outline of them now as it began to get lighter. Though the sky was cloudy and it looked like rain, in fact there was a slight sprinkle. I now had circulation in my legs, but my left foot was very sore on top where I'd been resting on my hobnail boots. I got my boots out from the sleeping bag and tried to stand up. I found that I was wobbly on my feet, but I had a good hold of my rifle. I asked, "What you fellas want with me?" Only some more chatter. It was getting lighter now, and I could see them quite clearly. I could make out forms of 4 people, 2 big and 2 little ones. They were all covered with hair and no clothes on at all. I could now make out mountains all around me. I looked at my watch. It was 4:25 a.m. It was getting lighter now, and I could see the people clearly. They looked like a family, old man, old lady, and 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. The boy and the girl seemed to be scared of me. The old lady did not seem too pleased about what the old man dragged home. But the old man was waving his arms and telling them all what he had in mind. They all left me then. I had my compass and my prospecting glass and strings around my neck, on strings around my neck. The compass in my left-hand shirt pocket and my glass in my right-hand pocket. I tried to reason our location and where I was. I could see now that I was in a small valley or basin about 8 or 10 acres, surrounded by high mountains. On the southeast side, there was a V-shaped opening about 8 feet wide at the bottom and about 20 feet wide at the highest point. That must be the way I came in. But how will I get out? The old man was now sitting near this opening. I moved my belongings up close to the west wall. There were 2 small cypress trees there, and this will do for a shelter for the time being, until I find out what these people want with me and how to get away from here. I emptied out my pack sack to see what I had left in the line of food. All my canned meat and vegetables were intact, and I had 1 can of coffee. Also 3 small cans of milk, 2 packages of Rye King hardtack, and my butter sealer half full of butter. But my prunes and macaroni were missing. Also my full box of shells for my rifle. I had my sheath knife, but my prospecting pick was missing and my can of matches. I only had my safety box full, and that held only about a dozen matches. That did not worry me. I can always start a fire with my prospecting glass when the sun is shining, if I got dry wood. I wanted hot coffee, but I had no wood. Also nothing around here that looked like wood. I had a good look over the valley from where I was, but the boy and the girl were always watching me from behind some juniper bush. I decided there must be some water around here. The ground was leaning toward the opening in the wall. There must be water at the upper end of this valley. There is green grass and moss along the bottom. All my utensils were left behind. I opened my coffee tin and emptied the coffee in a dish towel and tied it with a metal strip from the can. I took my rifle and the can and went looking for water. Right at the head under a cliff, there was a lovely spring that disappeared underground. I got a drink and a full can of water. When I got back, the young boy was looking over my belongings, but did not touch anything. On my way back, I noticed where these people were sleeping. On the east side wall of this valley was a shelf in the mountainside. with overhanging rock, looking something like a big undercut in a big tree about 10 feet deep and 30 feet wide. The floor was covered with lots of dry moss, and they had some kind of blankets woven of narrow strips of cedar bark, packed with dry moss. They looked very practical and warm, with no need of washing. The first day not much happened. I had to eat my food cold. The young fellow was coming nearer me and seemed curious about me. My one snuff box was empty, so I rolled it toward him. When he saw it coming, he sprang up quick as a cat and grabbed it. He went over to his sister and showed her. They found out how to open it and close it. They spent a long time playing with it. Then he trotted over to the old man and showed him. They had a long chatter. Next morning, I made up my mind to leave this place, if I had to shoot my way out. I could not stay much longer. I had only enough grub to last me till I got back to Toba Inlet. I did not know the direction, but I would go downhill and I would come out near civilization someplace. I rolled up my sleeping bag, put that inside my pack sack, packed a few cans I had, swung the sack on my back, injected the shell in the barrel of my rifle, and started for the opening in the wall. The old man got up, held up his hands as though he would push me back. I pointed to the opening. I wanted to go out, but he stood there pushing towards me and said something that sounded like "Soka Soka." I backed up to about 60 feet. I did not want to be too close. I thought if I had to shoot my way out, a 30-30 might not have much effect on this fellow. It might make him mad. I only had 6 shells, so I decided to wait. There must be a better way than killing him in order to get out from here. I went back to my campsite to figure out some other way to get out. I could make friends with the young fellow or the girl. They might help me if I only could talk to them. Then I thought of a fellow who saved himself from a mad bull by blinding him with snuff in his eyes. But how will I get near enough to this fellow to put snuff in his eyes? So I decided next time I give the young fellow my snuff box to leave a few grains of snuff in it. He might give the old man a taste of it. But the question is, in what direction will I go if I should get out? I must have been near 25 miles northeast of Toba Inlet when I was kidnapped. This fellow must have traveled at least 25 miles in the 3 hours he carried me. If he went west, we would be near salt water. Same thing if he went south. Therefore, he must have gone northeast. If I then keep going south and over 2 mountains, I must hit salt water someplace between London and Vancouver. The following day, I did not see the old lady till about 4 p.m. She came home with her arms full of grass and twigs and all kinds of spruce and hemlock, as well as some kind of nuts that grow in the ground. I have seen lots of them on Vancouver Island. The young fellow went up the mountain to the east every day. He could climb better than a mountain goat. He picked some kind of grass with long, sweet roots. He gave me some one day. They tasted very sweet. I gave him another snuff box with about a teaspoon of snuff in it. He tasted it, then went to the old man. He licked it with his tongue. They had a long chat. I made a dipper from a milk can. I made many dippers. You can use them for pots too. You cut 2 slits near the top of any can, then cut a limb from a small tree, cut down the back of the limb, I think he's messed up his sentence there. Cut the back of the limb down to the stem of the tree, then taper the part you cut from the stem. Then cut a hole in the taper part, slide the taper part in the slit you have made in the can, and you have a good handle on your can. I threw one over to the young fellow that was playing near my camp. He picked it up and looked at it. Then he went to the old man and showed it to him. They had a long chatter. Hold on, folks, they had a long chatter. Then he came to me, pointed at the dipper, then at his sister. I could see that he wanted one for her, too. I had other peas and carrots, so I made one up for his sister. He was standing only 8 feet away from me. When I had made the dipper, I dipped it in the water and drank from it. He was very pleased, almost smiled at me. Then I took a chew of snuff, smacked my lips, said, "That's good." The young fellow pointed to the old man, said something that sounded like ook. I got the idea that the old man liked snuff, and the young fellow wanted a box for the old man. I shook my head. I motioned with my hands for the old man to come to me. I do not think the young fellow understood what I meant. He went to his sister and gave her the dipper I made for her. They did not come near me again that day. I had now been here 6 days, but I was sure I was making progress. If only I could get the old man to come over to me, get him to eat a full box of snuff, that would kill him for sure, and that way kill himself. I wouldn't be guilty of murder. The old lady was a meek old thing. The young fellow was by this time quite friendly. The girl wouldn't hurt anybody. Her chest was flat like a boy's, no development like young ladies. I am sure if I could get the old man out of the way, I could easily have brought this girl out with me to civilization. But what good would that have been? I would have to keep her in a cage for public display. I don't think we have any right to force our way of life on other people, and I don't think they would like it. The noise and racket in a modern city they would not like any more than I do. The young fellow might have been between 11 and 18 years old and about 7 feet tall, and might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would be 50 to 55 inches, his waist about 36 to 38 inches. He had wide jaws, narrow forehead that slanted upward around the back about 4 or 5 inches higher than the forehead. The hair on their heads was about 6 inches long. The hair on the rest of the body was short and thick in places. The women's hair on the forehead had an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs, among women's hairdos. Nowadays, the old lady could have been anything between 40 and 70 years old. She was over 7 feet tall. She would be about 500 to 600 pounds. She had very wide hips and a goose-like walk. She was not built for beauty or speed. Some of those lovable brassieres and uplifts would have been a great improvement on her looks and her figure. The man's eye teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. The old man must have been near 8 feet tall. Big barrel chest and big hump on his back, powerful shoulders. His biceps and upper arms were enormous and tapered down to his elbows. His forearms were longer than common people have, but well proportioned. His hands were wide. The palm was long and broad and hollow like a scoop. His fingers were short in proportion to the rest of his hand. His fingernails were like chisels. The only place they had no hair was inside their hands and the soles of their feet and the upper part of the nose and eyelids. I never did see their ears. They were covered with hair hanging over them. If the old man were to wear a collar, it would have to be at least 30 inches. I have no idea what size shoes they would need. I was watching the young fellow's foot one day when he was sitting down. The soles of his feet seemed to be padded like a dog's foot, and the big toe was longer than the rest and very strong. In mountain climbing, all he needed was footing for his big toe. They were very agile. To sit down, they turned their knees out and came straight down. To rise, they came straight up without help of hands or arms. I don't think this valley was their permanent home. I think they moved from place to place, as food is available in different localities. They might eat meat, but I never saw them eat meat or do any cooking. I think this was probably a stopover place, and the plants and sweet roots on the mountainside might have been in season this time of year. They seemed to be most interested in them. The roots have a very sweet and satisfying taste. They always seem to do everything for a reason, wasted no time or anything they did not need. When they were not looking for food, the old man and the old lady were resting, but the boy and the girl were always climbing something or some other exercise. A favorite position was to take hold of his feet with his hands and balance on his rump, then bounce forward. The idea seems to be to see how far he could go without his feet or hands touching the ground. Sometimes he made 20 feet. But what do they want with me? They must understand I cannot stay here indefinitely. I will soon have to make a break for freedom. Not that I was mistreated in any way. One consolation was that the old man was coming closer each day and was very interested in my snuff, watching me when I take a pinch of snuff. He seems to think it was useless to only put it inside my lips. One morning after I had my breakfast, both the old man and the boy came and sat down only 10 feet away from me. This morning I made coffee. I had saved up all dry branches I found, and I had some dry moss, and I used all the labels from the cans to start a fire. I got my coffee pot boiling, and it was strong coffee too. And the aroma from the boiling coffee was what brought them over. I was sitting eating hardtack with plenty of butter on and sipping coffee, and it sure tasted good. I was smacking my lips pretending it was better than it really was. I set the can down that was about half full. I intended to warm it up later. I pulled out a full box of snuff, took a big chew. Before I had time to close the box, the old man reached for it. I was afraid he would waste it and only had 2 more boxes, so I held on to the box intending him to take a pinch just like I had done. Instead, he grabbed the box and emptied it into his mouth, swallowed it in one gulp. Then he licked the box inside with his tongue. After a few minutes, his eyes began to roll over in his head. He was looking straight up. I could see he was sick. Then he grabbed my coffee can that was quite cold by this time. He emptied that in his mouth, grounds and all. That did no good. He stuck his head between his legs and rolled forwards a few times away from me. Then he began to squeal like a stuck pig. I grabbed my rifle. I said to myself, this is it. If he comes for me, I will shoot him plumb between his eyes. But he started for the spring. He wanted water. I packed my sleeping bag in my pack sack with the few cans I had left. The young fellow ran over to his mother. Then she began to squeal. I started for the opening in the wall, and I just made it. The old lady was right behind me. I fired one shot at the rocker over her head. I guess she had never seen a rifle before. She turned and ran inside the wall. I injected another shell in the barrel of my rifle and started downhill, looking back over my shoulder every so often to see if they were coming. I was in a canyon, a good traveling, and I made fast time. Must have made 3 miles in some world record. I came to a turn in the canyon. I had the sun on my left. That meant I was going south, and the canyon turned west. I decided to climb the ridge ahead of me. I knew that I must have 2 mountain ridges between me and salt water, and climbing this ridge, I would only have a good view of this canyon, so I could see if the Sasquatch were coming after me. I had a light pack and was making good time up this hill. I stopped soon after to look back to where I came from, but nobody followed me. As I came over the ridge, I could see Mount Baker. Then I knew I was going in the right direction. I think I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there, because he kind of just goes into his, long description of how he got out of there. That's pretty much the entire encounter, his kidnapping encounter. So I think it's a very interesting encounter, and I made some notes on what things that stuck in my head as I was reading it. First thing is, it strikes me as being an honest encounter, because it's so much of the detailed description. Now, this came out of the source for this was from the book Sasquatch: The Apes Among Us by John Green. That's where this has come from. John Green, I guess, talked to Albert Ostman, and he recorded his story, and that's where this web page came from. It's an excerpt from John Green's book. So there's a lot of detailed description given by Albert Ostman about, he just seemed to be, he gave a lot of detail about, like going there and when he was leaving. He just seemed to be want to be as detailed as possible about everything. So I found that to be kind of genuine. Now, as far as things that I gleaned about Sasquatch from what he said is here. I've got some bullet points here. One is the Sasquatch has a lot of stamina to carry him for hours over mountainous terrain. Now, and the reason I say that, I mean, Sasquatch are strong, they're large, but I was actually surprised that, I mean, he's carrying an 80-pound pack sack, plus at least what we could probably say on average, this guy is at least 160, 170 pounds. You know, so we're talking over 200 pounds he's just toting for 3 hours, you know, up over mountainous terrain. I mean, even a Bigfoot has to have some limitations. So I was pretty surprised to find out that, I mean, the thing went without stopping. And then there towards the end, it actually started kind of running fast or jogging or whatever. He called it trotting. I found that very interesting. And the mother was not pleased that he was brought there. Now that has some implication. I mean, if, you know, I've speculated that Bigfoot, and I've talked about it in my other episodes, how I think Bigfoot are taking people and eating them. And I said I think it's rogues and old Sasquatch and not necessarily the family Sasquatch. And here in his story, he's talking about how the mother was not pleased that the father brought Ostman in there. That implies to me that, well, I guess, not really. I guess it could mean that she thinks he brought him there to eat and she didn't want no part of it. Could be. But to me, at first blush, it was that she had no idea why he was there, which means he wasn't on the menu at that point. However, somebody else, I think it was somebody that commented on one of my other episodes, said that they take people and they keep them hostage because it's easy to keep them alive until, you know, several days later when there's no game and they can and then they can kill them and eat them. I guess that could be, but you know, like he said, they weren't eating meat, at least not that he saw. They were eating like roots and berries and, you know, nuts and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I find that a little hard to believe that he was on the menu. I don't think he was on the menu. And he could have been, you know, who knows? But it didn't seem like he was. It seemed more like he was there as a pet, you know, kind of like bringing the stray dog home. And even though the mother responding by not being pleased, it's kind of like, you know, if your kid brings like when I was a kid, we bring a stray dog home, you know, mom, you know, she was like, what are you bringing this dog in here for? No, we already have a dog, or what, you know, we can't deal with this dog, or whatever the case happened to be, if we had a dog at the time or not. But, you know, it just strikes me as that's why he brought him home. It was a pet. The father waved his arms explaining, and there I said, so not on the menu. They used woven blankets. I thought that was kind of a very interesting thing for him to talk about. Now, everyone talks about how Bigfoot is primitive because there's no use of tools. You know, like back in caveman times, we had like sticks with little rocks that we chipped off in the shape of axes, you know, to have a little cutting edge on them and that kind of thing to make a tool. And tool use is a sign of, you know, intelligence, sentience, whatever, that they're an actual civilized or becoming civilized, I guess. But they're coming up in the scheme of things. Well, I think if they're weaving blankets, that kind of, to me, strikes me as along the lines of tools. You know, maybe they don't need tools because they're so strong. You know, people made tools to overcome limitations that we had because we're not strong enough to do certain things, and, you know, that kind of thing. And as I understand it, the stories I've heard is that, I mean, first of all, a Bigfoot can grab you know, I've heard of deer horses, and even one, I think it was a story down in Florida, I think it was a Brahma bull, where they just bent the neck over backwards and broke the neck. So that they're strong enough to kill any animal out there, in this continent anyway. So they wouldn't need, like, we had to make spears and we had to make clubs and that kind of thing to kill animals. They don't need that. As far as cutting tools, we had to make blades in order to cut through the hide to get at the meat. Well, as I understand it, there are stories out there where Bigfoot actually used, and he talks about how their fingernails are like chisels, that they've actually taken and used their fingernails to slice through the hide. So that being the case, they wouldn't necessarily have the same motivation to make tools that we had when we were primitive. We had to overcome, in order to survive day by day, we had to eventually made tools to make it easier for us to survive, where I don't think there would be much difference for them. So that would not be something they would be motivated to do. But now, keeping themselves warm, I could see that, even though they are fur covered. But, fur only goes so far. So I could see because of their physical abilities, that their tendency towards tools or things that help them live a better life, or however you want to put it, would be a different set of items than hatchets and spears. It would make sense to me. I also found it interesting that the boy had a sense of understanding and respect for Ostman's property, because he said he came back and he found the boy looking at his stuff, but he didn't touch it. I found that very interesting, that the kid did not touch, because, I could just imagine in that scenario, a chimpanzee, there would be, there's 4 chimpanzees, they would all just grab it and start running around, swinging it around and, screaming and stuff and beating it against stuff, breaking stuff, whatever. But this kid acted very civilized. He looked at his stuff, but he didn't touch it because it wasn't his. And then as soon as the guy threw him a snuff can or rolled one over to him, he jumped right up and grabbed it. So as soon as Ostman gave him something, he accepted it willingly. So it's not like he didn't want to touch it, because he was afraid of it. Obviously, he didn't touch it because it belonged to Ostman. And until Ostman gave him permission to have something, which is very interesting. I think that shows a social structure. Let's see here. Yeah. And then the father holding up his hands to stop Ostman from leaving, as if to push him back. That's something a human would do. You step in front of him, you go, no, stop, wait. That sounds exactly like what a human would do. And I find it's almost like a universal hand gestures. Just like if you've heard the Justin Smeha story, the guy who shot the Bigfoot, there's a big thing about that. He talks about how the one he shot in the butt, the mother waved her arms over her head like this to get his attention. That's something a human would do. And when I heard that, I was like, the only way a Bigfoot's going to do that is if this was some kind of a universal hand gestures. Like, when you come to a certain point in sentience, it becomes just universal that these certain things would just become universal, like waving your arms to get someone's attention, putting your hands up to stop. So when I heard this, I remembered the Justin Smeha story, and I said, well, this is a second time that somebody has reported a Bigfoot making what would be considered a universal gesture, but not the same one. So I think that pretty much tells me that more than likely, it's true. They are smart enough. They have developed to this universal gesture point. The mother and the boy went gathering during the day. All were up during the day. Now, people talk about how Bigfoot is nocturnal. And I have never believed that because you hear too many stories about people seeing Bigfoots during the day. And I have always believed that it's just like us. I work nights, so I'm up all night. Other people during the day. Now, they may be the opposite, where in general they're more active at night and less so during the day, whereas we're more active during the day and less so at night. But I think it's a very similar situation where they aren't necessarily nocturnal. They do things whenever they want to, kind of like us, as opposed to some animals and stuff out there. Once dusk or dawn hits, they're automatically going off. They're either going off to hide or they're coming out. Like just before dawn, you start to hear the birds chirp. But at night you don't hear the birds. The birds they're done. They're roosting for the night. It's not like that. They're like us. They do what they want when they want. And this just is another thing that tells me that if they're up hunter or gathering, roots and nuts and all of that stuff during the day, then this particular group has chosen to where they're active during the day and evidently not during the night, because he doesn't mention anything in the story about them doing anything at night. So I would assume that means they don't. The boy wanted a dipper for his sister. I find that very interesting too, is that he gives him a dipper and immediately the first thing the boy wants is to give one for his sister too. That shows a family bond. It's like human siblings, that get along good anyway. Human siblings that love each other and get along well. It's the same scenario. You give something to one child, they'll say, "Oh, will you give one to my sister or my brother?" It's the same thing. And I find that very interesting. Whereas I think in like a chimpanzee group or any other primate group, you give one to the one, and they'll start running around with it, waving it, beating it on stuff or whatever, and then the sibling would probably chase after that one, trying to take it away, and they would end up getting into a fight. I think that is more of animalistic behavior, whereas this was more social behavior. The boy talked with the father about everything Ostman gave him. And I found it interesting. He talked to the father, but he didn't talk to the mother or the sister. So there was obviously really very much like a father-son relationship there, and it also you could glean from that even in the Bigfoot world, the males and the females are very similar to the way it used to be for us, where women couldn't even own property. They were to be not to speak unless spoken to, that kind of thing. I don't think it was quite that bad, but there does seem to be that same kind of dynamic going on with this Bigfoot family. At least that's my impression from the way the boy and the father talked about stuff. The boy cares about the sister, but he talks to the father. You know what I mean? They discuss stuff. The girl had no breasts. I found this interesting. She has no breasts, and I'm going to get to why. Yet he knew she was female. I'm talking about the young girl. If she had no breasts, but he knew she was female, then obviously the only way that you can find out if something's male or female is you look up the skirt, right? So he must have seen her genitalia. And yet he doesn't mention anything about her genitalia being odd. Which means that, and now here's the what makes this weird is if in case y'all don't know, the only mammal or ape or whatever that has labia majora, which is the thicker skin on the outside of the female, is humans. We're the only ones that have it. Apes, chimpanzees, that all they have is the labia minora. So it's like just I don't want to get too graphic here. Y'all, you know what I'm talking about. So if only humans have that, and he didn't say, well, yeah, but you had a peculiar, nothing like that. Then obviously he saw her genitalia and it looked like a normal female to him. That's what I would gather from that. I would like to be able to verify that through another source, because to me, that would definitely link humans with Bigfoots. There's obviously a common ancestor or some kind of a connection genetically between us, because humans are the only females that have that structure to their genitalia. Thought I might have messed up my encoder, but I didn't. Hit my keyboard there. Yeah, humans are the only females that have that kind of genitalia. Never remarked about it being abnormal. Only human females have labia majora. And then he talks about the mother being meek. And I found that interesting. It is because he's really, he's describing what you could imagine if you take out the fact that they're Bigfoots. This could be any family. The father, the strong, controlling father, the hyperactive, outgoing son, the quiet and timid daughter, and the meek, quiet wife, who shows her disinterest or her dislike for him bringing this person home, but will deal with it because he's the man. It's very, to me, it mirrors a regular human family, the different relationships and stuff. The mother had sagging breasts like Patty. Only human females had breasts. Yeah, that's another thing. Only all apes and that they only have breasts while they're breastfeeding, and then they go away. Humans are the only females that always have. They develop those breasts and they're there. So there's another connection. You got the labia and the breasts. Both seem to be like humans. I'm not a genetic scientist or whoever would be required to figure that out. But to me, it seems like if the genitalia is the same as a human, and it's only Bigfoots don't exist, right, to scientists? So according to them, human females are the only ones that have these attributes. So if Bigfoots have these attributes, they have to be somehow related to humans. They have to be. There has to be a common ancestor or something. There's a genetic connection between us. He passed at least. This is about Albert Ostman. He says that he passed at least one polygraph about this story, and I think it was more than one. I think it was like 3 or 4 times he was tested, and every time he was tested, he passed. But I don't remember how many, so I put he passed at least one. But and these are about the parts that I question. I question why he didn't fire his rifle. If he was in that sleeping bag, he was being taken God knows where, by God knows what. He's in pain. And he had his rifle. He couldn't. He tried to reach his knife to cut his way out, and he couldn't. But he did have his rifle. Why didn't he? I'm not talking about shoot at the creature. It's a rifle. You would have to shoot it in whatever direction it's pointing in. Why didn't he just fire it? the or the gun going off probably would have been enough for the Bigfoot to drop him, and that would have given him an opportunity to shoot his way out or whatever. So I do question that, but at the same time, I don't know if I would. I mean, but see, I know what a Bigfoot is. I've seen one. We all know they're big, they're huge, they're this, they're that. They can kill you. This man never heard of one. He heard a story from an Indian on the way out there, and that was it. So why wouldn't he have just fired his rifle, thinking, he probably would have fired it, got out of the sleeping bag, and then went, holy crap, at that point. But I would think he would have fired it, but who knows? I mean, that's just a question that came up in my head. And the other part that I found a little strange was it was odd that the Bigfoot would camp in a location with no escape. But at the same time, he talked about how the boy could climb, what was it, like a billy goat or whatever it was, and he went up the east face or something. So without having seen, based on his description, I find it odd that they camped where they did. It seems like they've got themselves boxed in. But like I said, maybe they could climb up and with no problem. To them, it was just it was difficult for others to get at them, but they could get out. I don't know. But those were the only questions that came up. For the most part, I find this a very interesting story. And I think it really, just a little, there's not a lot of information here, but the information that is here, I find very interesting as far as it pertains to Sasquatch and what it tells us about them. It tells us they're social. They have a very similar family structure. They have what appears to me, they have manners. Because the boy didn't want to take anything. I just find it fascinating that, assuming the story is real, because nobody knows, he passed the polygraphs. It sounds real. It sounds genuine. And everybody who's heard it personally from him said the same thing. So, taking on face value that it's true, it's really fascinating, that they're the way they are, I think. But who knows? The next night he might have been on the menu. Who knows? But as far as their structure, it was very interesting. And I think it really, to me, solidifies that there's a closer connection between humans and Sasquatch. Or there is a close connection. Because some people believe there is and some people don't. I do. It further validates to me that there is a close connection between humans and Sasquatch. So where are we at here? An hour and 3 minutes. Okay, folks. I actually didn't think it was going to take that long. I thought I'd have to add some filler. Anyway, so please like, subscribe, share. Don't forget to click on that bell so that you'll get the notifications of my live show starting not this coming Saturday, next Saturday, but the one after that. And since it's going to be every other one, and you don't have to keep track, is this the night or not? Just click on that bell and you'll get an email notifying you that I've got a live show coming, and that'll be the best way to do it. But in the meantime, please that I guess helps me out as far as YouTube's statistics and all that stuff, and it makes it show up on the recommended page and that kind of stuff. So please like or don't like. I guess that helps too for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, dislike, comment below. And if y'all have some better recommendations than Saturday night at 10, it's still going to have to be every other week because of the way my schedule works. But 10 o'clock on Saturday is where I'm sitting right now. But if there's more of a demand for some other time, then I can change it. So like, comment, subscribe, share, and I guess that will do it. Here's how to, as always, how to get a hold of me. So until next time, people, y'all take it easy.